poor single mom was fired without mercy until the Mafia Boss bought the company before sunset. Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day, staying healthy, and finding a little extra luck wherever life takes you. Before we begin today's unforgettable story, may I borrow just 5 seconds of your good fortune? Please help this channel grow by subscribing and turning on notifications so you never miss another emotional journey like this one. Thank you so much for your support, your kindness, and for being part of this amazing community. I truly appreciate every one of you. Now I would love to hear from you before we begin. Where in the world are you watching this video from, and what time is it there right now? With that said, let us begin this powerful story together. The longest walk of my life lasted less than 50 feet. At exactly 4:37 on a gray Thursday afternoon, I stood outside the executive conference room, holding a folder that contained 5 years of performance reviews, every one of them marked excellent. None of them mattered anymore. The air inside Carter and Brooks' financial smelled of fresh coffee, expensive perfume, and polished wood, the kind of place where appearances always seemed more valuable than people. I adjusted the simple silver necklace my late mother had given me, took one slow breath, and reminded myself that I only needed to survive another hour before picking up my 7-year-old daughter, Lily, from her after-school program. She was waiting for me to bring home frozen pizza, because Thursdays were our movie nights. I smiled just thinking about it. Then the conference room door opened. Emily, come in. Mr. Richard Sullivan, the regional director, did not bother inviting me to sit down. 2 human resources representatives stared at their laptops while avoiding eye contact. The silence told me everything before anyone spoke. Sullivan folded his hands neatly on the table. We have decided to eliminate your position, effective immediately. My heartbeat stumbled. Eliminate my position? I asked quietly. My department exceeded every quarterly goal this year. He nodded without emotion. This decision is part of a restructuring plan. I looked toward the printed charts spread across the table. They still displayed my team's highest performance numbers. Then why am I the only manager being let go? Another uncomfortable silence followed. Finally, Sullivan leaned back in his chair. Frankly, Emily, clients expect a certain image from leadership. Constant schedule adjustments because of your daughter, leaving early for school emergencies, declining evening networking events, has become difficult. My fingers tightened around the folder. Every adjustment was approved. My performance never dropped. Performance is not the only factor, he replied. The words landed harder than I expected. He was not firing an employee. He was dismissing a mother. I wanted to argue. I wanted to defend every sleepless night, every birthday party I skipped because of deadlines, every lunch break spent answering emails from a school nurse. Instead, I realized none of it would matter. Their decision had already been made. One of the human resources representatives slid a cardboard box across the table. Security will help you gather your personal belongings. I looked at the box for several seconds before picking it up. 5 years reduced to a piece of folded cardboard. As I walked through the open office, keyboards gradually fell silent. Some coworkers lowered their eyes with sympathy. Others pretended to keep working. Nobody wanted to become the next person carrying a box toward the elevator. On my desk sat a framed picture of Lily wearing a paper crown from her first grade graduation. I carefully placed it inside the box beside a coffee mug decorated with tiny yellow sunflowers and a knitted blue scarf my daughter had made during art camp. Emily, I turned to find my closest coworker, Sarah, fighting back tears. I am so sorry. I forced a smile that did not feel real. Take care of yourself. The elevator doors closed, reflecting a woman I barely recognized. Exhausted eyes, wrinkled blouse, a future suddenly erased before sunset. Outside, cold autumn wind scattered red leaves across the parking lot as I balanced the cardboard box against my hip. My phone vibrated. The caller. Identification showed Lily's school. My heart immediately sank. I answered before the second ring. Hello. The school's secretary spoke gently. Ms. Carter, Lily is waiting in the nurse's office. She says she feels fine, but she keeps asking when you are coming. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Please tell her I am already on my way. As I ended the call and wiped away a tear before it could fall, the deep rumble of several black luxury sport utility vehicles echoed through the nearly empty parking lot, and every employee walking toward their cars instinctively stopped to watch. Some people reveal who they truly are by the way they treat someone who has already lost everything. The line of black sport utility vehicles rolled slowly across the parking lot until the center vehicle stopped directly in front of the main entrance. Conversations faded into silence. Even employees who had been hurrying home paused beside their cars, curiosity replacing exhaustion. One by one, several men wearing perfectly tailored dark suits stepped out first. They spoke quietly into discreet earpieces before opening the rear passenger door. Then he appeared, tall, calm, impeccably dressed in a charcoal overcoat that rested naturally across broad shoulders. Dark lines of intricate tattoos disappear beneath the open collar of his crisp white shirt, climbing just high enough along his neck to hint at stories nobody could read. His polished shoes barely made a sound against the pavement as he surveyed the building with measured confidence. There was nothing theatrical about him. He did not demand attention. Attention simply followed him wherever he walked. I lowered my eyes and shifted the cardboard box in my arms. Whoever he was, he belonged to a world that had nothing to do with mine. I only wanted to reach Lily before she started worrying. As I stepped off the sidewalk, one corner of the cardboard box softened beneath my grip. The bottom gave way without warning. My belongings scattered across the asphalt. Pins rolled beneath parked cars. Family photographs fluttered across the pavement like fallen leaves. My sunflower coffee mug tipped over but somehow did not break. I closed my eyes for one embarrassed second before kneeling to gather everything as quickly as I could. I am fine, I whispered to nobody in particular. I am fine. Footsteps approached. I expected security. Instead, a shadow stopped beside me. A large hand reached down before I could stop it, carefully lifting the framed photograph of Lily from the pavement. He studied the smiling little girl wearing her paper graduation crown before handing the frame back to me with remarkable care. "Your daughter?" he asked quietly. His voice was deep, controlled, and unexpectedly gentle. I nodded. "Yes, she has your smile." I almost laughed at the irony because I had not smiled all afternoon. "Thank you." I accepted the picture, hoping the conversation would end there. Instead, his eyes drifted toward the employee identification badge still hanging around my neck. Emily Carter. Hearing my name from a complete stranger felt strangely unsettling. "You know me?" He gave a slight shake of his head. "Not yet." Before I could ask another question, voices echoed from the building entrance. Richard Sullivan hurried outside with several senior executives following closely behind. The confidence he had displayed inside the conference room had completely vanished. "Mr. Cole," he called with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Welcome. We have been expecting you." The stranger turned toward him without changing expression. So his name was Adrian Cole. Sullivan extended both hands eagerly, but Adrian acknowledged him with only a brief handshake before glancing back in my direction. His eyes settled for one quiet moment on the cardboard box still resting beside my feet. "One question," Adrian said calmly. Sullivan smiled nervously. "Of course. Anything you need." Adrian's voice remained almost conversational. "Why is one of your employees leaving the building carrying her life in a cardboard box?" The executives exchanged uncertain looks. Sullivan forced a small laugh. "An unfortunate staffing adjustment. Nothing significant." Adrian did not respond immediately. The silence stretched long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Finally, he looked directly at Sullivan again. "Nothing significant." His eyes returned briefly to the photograph of Lily still clutched against my chest before he asked one final question that seemed to stop the autumn wind itself. "Who made the decision to fire her?" Power is never measured by how loudly someone speaks. It is measured by how quietly everyone else falls silent. Nobody answered Adrian immediately. Richard Sullivan's confident smile stiffened as though he had suddenly forgotten how to breathe. The executives standing behind him exchanged uncertain glances, each silently hoping someone else would speak first. Finally, Sullivan cleared his throat. The decision was mine, Mr. Cole. It was a routine business matter. Adrian studied him for a long moment without raising his voice or changing his expression. Routine, he repeated calmly. Please explain. Sullivan straightened his expensive tie. The company is reducing management expenses. Ms. Carter's position was selected during restructuring. Adrian's eyes shifted toward me. How many years has she worked here? Before anyone else could answer, I spoke quietly. 5. Performance evaluations? He asked. I hesitated. Consistently excellent. One of the human resources representatives lowered her gaze. Adrian noticed. Is that accurate? She swallowed nervously before answering. Yes, sir. Ms. Carter has received the highest annual review in her division for the past 3 years. The parking lot became strangely quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause. Adrian turned back towards Sullivan. Then I have another question. Sullivan forced another smile. Of course. Did her performance decline? No. Did she violate company policy? No. Did she behave unethically? No. Each answer sounded weaker than the one before it. Adrian folded his hands behind his back. Then what changed? Sullivan looked briefly toward the other executives before replying. Leadership requires flexibility. Ms. Carter's family obligations occasionally limited her availability for after-hours commitments. I felt heat rise in my face. I wanted to disappear before another stranger had to defend me. Adrian remained completely still. Family obligations? Sullivan nodded. She is raising a child alone. We require leaders who can fully dedicate themselves to the company's future. Adrian looked toward the framed photograph still resting in my arms. So you dismissed your strongest manager because she kept her promises to her daughter. Nobody corrected him. Nobody could. For the first time that afternoon, I noticed genuine disappointment in Adrian's eyes. It was not anger. It was something quieter, as though he had expected better from people entrusted with responsibility. He stepped closer to me, stopping at a respectful distance. Ms. Carter, he said gently, may I ask one question? I nodded. When they informed you of this decision, did anyone thank you for your years of service? The question caught me completely off guard. I replayed the meeting in my mind. The conference room, the cardboard box, the silence. I slowly shook my head. No. Adrian closed his eyes for a brief second before opening them again. I am sorry. Those 3 words nearly broke me. Not because they solved anything, but because they were the first words of kindness anyone at the company had offered all afternoon. My phone vibrated again. Lily's school. I answered immediately. Hello. The school's secretary smiled through the speaker. Do not worry, Ms. Carter. Lily is reading in the library while she waits. She keeps telling everyone her mom always comes. My throat tightened. Please tell her I am almost there. After ending the call, I picked up the last notebook from the pavement and balanced the damaged cardboard box against my hip once more. Excuse me, I said softly. My daughter needs me. Adrian stepped aside without hesitation. Of course she does. I started walking toward my aging sedan parked near the far end of the lot. Halfway there, I looked back only once. Adrian had not entered the building. He remained standing exactly where I had left him, quietly watching the corporate headquarters as though reconsidering something far bigger than the meeting he had originally come to attend. Then he turned toward one of the men waiting beside the black vehicles and spoke only a single sentence. Although I could not hear every word from that distance, I clearly saw. The assistant's eyes widened before he immediately reached for his phone, and whatever instruction Adrian had just given sent every person around him into motion. Sometimes an entire empire changes direction because one decent person was treated without dignity. By the time I reached Lincoln Elementary, the late afternoon sky had turned soft shades of orange and gold. Lily spotted me through the library window before I even stepped inside. The moment she ran into my arms, every painful conversation from the office faded into the background. Mom, she said with complete confidence, I knew you would come. I kissed the top of her head and smiled. I will always come. Children measure wealth differently than adults. Lily did not ask whether I had a job. She asked whether we could still watch our Thursday movie together. I looked at the frozen pizza resting in the grocery bag I had picked up on the way home after counting every dollar left in my checking account. Absolutely, I answered. Movie night is never canceled. We spent the evening sitting on our old couch beneath a faded blue blanket, laughing at an animated adventure while rain tapped gently against the apartment windows. Lily eventually fell asleep with her head resting against my shoulder. I carried her carefully to bed, tucked the blanket around her, and quietly closed the bedroom door before allowing myself to cry for the first time all day. The next morning, I woke before sunrise and opened my laptop at the tiny kitchen table. I updated my resume, submitted applications, and searched every employment website I could find. Hours passed without a single interview request. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. Emily, something unbelievable is happening. Turn on the business news. Confused, I switched on the television. Every financial network displayed the same headline across the bottom of the screen. A major investment group had launched an emergency acquisition offer for Carter and Brooks Financial. Reporters gathered outside the corporate headquarters while analysts tried to explain how a transaction of that size had appeared almost without warning. Then the camera showed the man I had met in the parking lot. Adrian Cole walked through a crowd of reporters with the same calm expression he had worn the previous afternoon. Questions flew toward him from every direction. Mr. Cole, was this acquisition planned? Why purchase a financial company so suddenly? What changes will you make? Adrian stopped briefly before entering the building. Strong companies are built by strong people, he answered evenly. Leadership should recognize integrity instead of punishing it. He offered nothing more before disappearing inside. My heart skipped a beat. Surely that statement could not have anything to do with me. It had to be a coincidence. Across town, inside the executive boardroom where I had been dismissed only hours earlier, Richard Sullivan and the senior executives sat around the polished conference table with anxious expressions replacing yesterday's confidence. Legal advisors hurried in and out carrying stacks of documents while phones rang without interruption. Shortly before 5 o'clock, the final signatures were completed. Ownership of the company officially changed hands before the sun slipped below the skyline. Employees throughout the building received a brief company-wide email. Effective immediately, Adrian Cole had become the new majority owner and executive chairman. A second message followed only minutes later. All employment termination decisions made during the previous 30 days were suspended pending an independent review. My phone rang almost instantly. The caller identification displayed a number from the corporate office. I stared at it in disbelief before answering. The voice on the other end spoke carefully. Ms. Carter, this is Human Resources. Mr. Cole has requested a meeting with you at your convenience. He said there is something important that deserves to be made right. Real justice does not humiliate people. It restores the dignity they should never have lost in the first place. I barely slept that night. The phone call from Human Resources echoed through my mind long after Lily had fallen asleep beside her favorite stuffed rabbit. By sunrise, I had convinced myself the meeting would probably end with another apology wrapped in corporate language. Companies apologized every day. They rarely changed. After dropping Lily off at school with a promise that I would meet her for ice cream after class, I drove back to the headquarters I had believed I would never enter again. The glass tower looked exactly the same, yet something had changed the moment I stepped through the revolving doors. The receptionist, who had barely looked up from her computer for years, stood immediately and greeted me with a warm smile. Good morning, Miss Carter. Mr. Cole is expecting you. Expecting me. Those words sounded strange after spending years feeling invisible. Instead of sending me to the Human Resources office, she directed me to the executive floor. The elevator doors opened onto a quiet hallway where sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Adrian stood alone near the conference room window, his charcoal suit perfectly tailored, the faint outline of tattoos still visible above the open collar of his white shirt. He turned as I approached and offered a respectful smile. Thank you for coming. I was curious, I admitted. You said something deserved to be made right. He motioned toward the conference table where several neatly organized folders rested beside cups of untouched coffee. Please sit, I noticed Richard Sullivan and two senior executives already seated across from us. Yesterday, they had looked untouchable. Today, they looked deeply uncomfortable. Adrian remained standing. Before we discussed the future, he began calmly. We need to acknowledge the past. He opened one of the folders. An independent review examined every employment decision made over the past month. It found that Ms. Emily Carter consistently exceeded every measurable performance standard. There was no documented business justification for terminating her position. Nobody interrupted him. The review also concluded that assumptions regarding family responsibilities influenced the decision. That is unacceptable. Adrian looked towards Sullivan. Would you like to say anything? Sullivan slowly stood. The confidence that had once filled his voice had completely disappeared. Ms. Carter, he said quietly, I made a decision based on personal bias instead of professional merit. I was wrong. I sincerely apologize. I studied his face for several seconds. For the first time, the apology felt genuine rather than strategic. Adrian nodded once before continuing. Mr. Sullivan has submitted his resignation. It was accepted voluntarily this morning. There was no celebration in Adrian's voice, only quiet finality. He slid another folder toward me. This contains an offer to return as Director of Client Services with full back pay, restore benefits, and complete authority to build your own management team. I stared at the document without touching it. Why would you do this for someone you barely know? Adrian answered without hesitation. Because companies do not become stronger by protecting unfair decisions. They become stronger when honest people know their work matters. The room fell silent again. I finally looked up from the offer letter. What if I choose not to come back? Adrian smiled faintly. Then I will respect your decision and wish you success wherever your path leads. No pressure, no obligation, no hidden condition. For the second time since we met, the most powerful man in the room gave me something I had almost forgotten I possessed. A choice. As I closed the folder and looked out across the city, I realized this meeting had never been about getting my old job back. It was about reclaiming the self-respect I had walked out of this building believing I had lost forever. The strongest people are often revealed not inside boardrooms, but on ordinary afternoons beside a child who only wants someone to stay. I accepted Adrian's offer to return to the company, but under one condition. I will come back because I earned my place, I told him. Not because anyone feels sorry for me. Adrian nodded without hesitation. That is exactly why I asked you to return. There was no argument. No persuasión. Only respect. Monday morning felt strangely unfamiliar. Coworkers greeted me with genuine smiles instead of awkward sympathy. And for the first time in years, I walked through the lobby feeling seen rather than overlooked. Adrian never interfered with my work. He attended executive meetings, reviewed financial reports, and quietly reshaped the company's culture through clear expectations instead of dramatic speeches. Employees quickly realized something important. Titles still mattered, but character mattered more. Every policy affecting working parents was reviewed. Flexible scheduling became available to everyone, not just senior executives. Childcare assistance was expanded. Performance was measured by results rather than appearances. Nobody mentioned my name during those announcements, yet I understood exactly why those changes existed. One Friday afternoon, I arrived at Lincoln Elementary a little earlier than usual. Children rushed across the playground beneath a bright blue sky, while parents gathered near the front gate. Lily spotted me immediately, but instead of running straight toward me, she waved excitedly toward someone standing beside the sidewalk. I followed her gaze and smiled in surprise. Adrian stood there wearing dark jeans, a navy sweater, and a lightweight jacket instead of one of his tailored business suits. Without the formal clothes, he looked less intimidating and somehow more approachable. The tattoos along his neck remained visible, but they no longer caught my attention first. His calm eyes did. Lily ran toward him before slowing to a stop. Mom says we always ask before joining someone, she said politely. Adrian smiled. That is a very smart rule. She looked back at me. Can he walk with us to the park? I considered the question for only a moment before nodding. If Mr. Cole has time. Adrian chuckled softly. For this invitation, I certainly do. The neighborhood park sat only a few blocks from the school. Autumn leaves covered the walking paths, while children laughed from the swings and climbing structures. Lily immediately challenged Adrian to a race across the small wooden balance bridge. I expected him to decline. Instead, he removed his watch, slipped it into his pocket, and accepted with complete seriousness. Lily won by 3 full steps and celebrated as though she had conquered the world. Adrian applauded first. I underestimated my opponent, he admitted with a smile. You are very fast. I know, Lily answered proudly before bursting into laughter. Watching them together felt unexpectedly peaceful. There was no attempt to impress anyone. Adrian simply listened when Lily talked about school, admired every drawing she proudly showed him, and accepted the tiny yellow dandelion she picked for him as though it were priceless. As the sun began sinking behind the trees, Lily wandered toward a nearby fountain to watch a family of ducks. Adrian and I remained on a quiet bench. Neither of us spoke for several moments. Finally, he broke the silence. Thank you for trusting me today. I looked toward my daughter, who waved happily from across the grass. Trust is not given all at once, I said quietly. It grows one honest moment at a time. Adrian nodded. Then I will be patient. His answer settled gently inside my heart because it carried no expectation. When Lily returned, she slipped one small hand into mine and the other into Adrian's without thinking twice. Neither of us moved at first. Then we looked at each other, smiled quietly, and walked home together beneath the golden evening sky, each careful not to let go of the little hand that had somehow begun bringing 2 very different worlds together. The smallest acts of kindness often leave the deepest footprints in another person's heart. Life slowly settled into a rhythm that felt almost unfamiliar. Every morning, I drove Lily to school before heading to the office, and every evening we shared dinner at our tiny apartment while laughing about the little moments that made each day unique. Adrian never tried to become the center of our lives. Instead, he quietly became a dependable part of them. Some afternoons, he stopped by the office with coffee for the entire management team, instead of only bringing one for me. Other evenings, he joined us at the neighborhood park, where Lily insisted on teaching him the rules of every playground game she invented. Watching a man who negotiated multi-million-dollar acquisitions spend 20 minutes pretending the sandbox was an archaeological dig somehow made perfect sense. He never looked embarrassed. He looked happy. One afternoon, while organizing archive company records in preparation for a compliance review, I discovered an old community outreach file from nearly 8 years earlier. Inside were photographs from a volunteer event held at a downtown shelter after a severe winter storm. Curious, I flipped through the pages until one photograph made my heart stop. There I was, several years younger, wearing an oversized volunteer apron and handing out hot meals to people who had been stranded by the weather. Standing only a few feet away was a younger Adrian. His hair was shorter, his expression more guarded, and the tattoos on his neck were mostly hidden beneath a thick scarf. I stared at the picture in disbelief. That evening, I carried the file to Adrian's office after everyone else had gone home. He looked up from his desk as I placed the photograph between us. You knew, I whispered. He studied the picture before smiling softly. I wondered when you would find it. I pulled out the chair across from him. Why did you never tell me? Adrian rested his hands on the desk. Because I did not want gratitude to become the reason you trusted me. I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. That winter, he said quietly, I had just taken responsibility for my family's business after losing someone very important to me. I spent weeks believing the world only respected power. Then I met a volunteer who treated every stranger exactly the same. She gave away the last bowl of soup even after working all day. When someone thanked her, she smiled and said, "People should never have to earn kindness." I covered my mouth as the memory returned. I had completely forgotten saying those words. Adrian had not. You remembered all this time? I asked. He nodded once. I never forgot the woman who reminded me that compassion is not weakness. My eyes filled with tears that refused to stay hidden. For years I believed I had lived an ordinary life, unnoticed by everyone except my daughter. I never imagined one simple afternoon of helping strangers had quietly changed someone else's future. Adrian stood and walked around the desk, stopping close enough for me to see the sincerity in his eyes, but leaving enough space for me to choose what happened next. "Emily," he said gently, "I did not buy a company because I pitied you. I invested in a company because I refused to let it lose its best leader. The woman I met years ago deserved better than what happened in that parking lot." Without thinking, I reached forward and wrapped my arms around him in a brief, grateful embrace. He returned the hug with quiet warmth before stepping back respectfully. As I left his office that evening, I realized fate had not brought two strangers together. It had simply reunited two people whose lives had crossed long before either of them understood why. The greatest love stories are not built on grand promises. They are built on two people choosing each other again and again. Winter slowly surrendered to spring, and with every passing week, life became quieter in the most beautiful way. I no longer woke each morning wondering whether everything could disappear before sunset. Instead, I found comfort in ordinary routines. Lily walked into school with a brighter smile. I led my department with confidence instead of fear. Adrian continued transforming the company, not through dramatic announcements, but through steady decisions that reminded everyone respect was no longer optional. One Friday afternoon, after finishing an employee appreciation event, Adrian invited Lily and me to visit a new community center the company had quietly funded. It stood only a few miles from our neighborhood, offering tutoring programs, affordable childcare, and career workshops for single parents searching for a second chance. There were no giant banners carrying Adrian's name. No marble plaques celebrating generous donations. The building simply opened its doors to people who needed it most. Lily wandered through the colorful reading room with wide eyes before running toward a shelf filled with children's books. "Mom," she called excitedly, "they even have a science corner." Adrian smiled as he watched her excitement. Every child deserves a place where they can dream without worrying about tomorrow. His words stayed with me long after Lily disappeared, into a group of children building model rockets. We stepped outside onto a quiet courtyard where flowering trees lined a stone pathway. Gentle afternoon sunlight filtered through the branches, painting moving patterns across the ground. I looked at Adrian for a long moment before speaking. "You have done so much for other people. Why do you never tell anyone?" He gave a thoughtful smile. "Because kindness loses something the moment it becomes a performance." I laughed softly. "You always have an answer." He shook his head. "Not always. There is still one question I have never been brave enough to ask." My heart beat a little faster. "What is it?" Adrian looked directly into my eyes with the same calm honesty he had shown from the day we met in the parking lot. "Would you allow me to be part of your future, not as the man who bought your company, but simply as the man who cares about you and Lily?" His voice remained steady, free of pressure or expectation. He was offering his heart, not requesting an obligation. I took a slow breath before answering. "The day you gave me back my dignity, I respected you. The day I watched you treat my daughter with patience and kindness, I trusted you." Somewhere between those moments, I smiled through tears that refused to stay hidden. I began loving you. Neither of us rushed forward. Neither of us tried to turn the moment into something larger than it needed to be. Adrian gently reached for my hand, waiting until my fingers naturally intertwined with his. It felt less like beginning a new chapter and more like finally arriving where we had been walking all along. Just then, Lily ran across the courtyard carrying a small paper windmill she had made during an art activity. "Look," she shouted happily. "It spins even when the wind is little." Adrian knelt beside her as she proudly demonstrated how the colorful blades turned with the slightest breeze. He applauded as though she had invented something extraordinary. Lily beamed before slipping one hand into mine and the other into his. "Can we all go get ice cream?" she asked hopefully. Adrian looked toward me first. I smiled. "I think that sounds perfect." Together we walked toward the little ice cream shop across the street, leaving behind a company that had changed because fairness finally mattered and stepping toward a future built not on power or wealth, but on quiet trust shared laughter, and the simple decision to choose one another every single day. The richest people are not those who own the most. They're the ones who never let the people they love wonder where they belong. 1 year later, I found myself standing beneath the same golden autumn sky that had once witnessed the worst afternoon of my life. The trees surrounding Lincoln Elementary glowed with shades of amber and crimson, and children laughed across the playground exactly as they had the day everything changed. Only this time, my heart felt completely different. Lily raced ahead toward the front entrance carrying a science project she had proudly spent weeks building. She turned around halfway across the sidewalk and waved excitedly. "Hurry up," she called. Adrian laughed beside me, the sound warm and genuine. She definitely did not inherit my patience. No, ideas asufli. She inherited my determination. He smiled, and together we followed our daughter toward the school doors. Family Appreciation Day had returned. As parents gathered inside the auditorium, I quietly remembered the cardboard box, the painful silence, and the feeling that my entire future had disappeared before sunset. It felt like another lifetime. This year, Lily stood confidently on the stage, wearing a bright blue dress and the same fearless smile that had always carried me through my darkest days. Her teacher invited each student to introduce the people who inspired them most. When Lily's turn arrived, she held up a colorful drawing she had made herself. 3 figures stood beneath a large oak tree, holding hands while smiling toward a bright, rising sun. "This is my family," she said proudly into the microphone. "My mom taught me that you should never stop being kind, even when life is hard. Adrian taught me that strong people protect others instead of making them afraid. Together they taught me that home is wherever people love you every day." The room filled with heartfelt applause. I wiped away a tear before it could fall. Adrian reached for my hand beneath the row of chairs, gently intertwining his fingers with mine. It was such a small gesture, yet it carried every promise we had built together over the past year. After the ceremony, families gathered outside beneath the warm afternoon sun. Miss Collins smiled as she hugged Lily before turning toward us. "She is one of the happiest children in school," she said. "You can see how loved she feels." Those words meant more than any promotion or award I had ever received. Several former coworkers approached us throughout the afternoon, not to discuss business, but simply to thank Adrian for creating a workplace where parents no longer felt forced to choose between career and family. He accepted every compliment with quiet humility before gently redirecting the praise toward the employees who had embraced the new culture together. Later that evening, we returned to the little neighborhood park where Lily had first challenged Adrian to race across the wooden balance bridge. The playground looked exactly the same, yet our lives had changed beyond anything I could have imagined. Lily ran ahead, chasing bubbles floating through the cool evening air, while Adrian and I watched from the same bench, where we had once spoken about trust. He reached into his jacket pocket and removed a small velvet box. My heart skipped before he even opened it. Inside rested a simple platinum ring, elegant without unnecessary extravagance. Adrian looked into my eyes with the same calm sincerity that had first earned my respect. "Emily," he said softly, "every important decision I have ever made became meaningful only after you and Lily walked into my life. Would you allow me the honor of loving both of you for the rest of mine?" Tears blurred my vision as I nodded. "Yes." He carefully slipped the ring onto my finger before leaning forward and placing a gentle kiss upon my forehead, followed by a soft kiss upon my lips that carried nothing but tenderness, gratitude, and hope. At that exact moment, Lily came running back toward us, laughing as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky with brilliant shades of gold. Without saying a word, she slipped her hands into ours, and together we walked home as one family. Looking back now, I finally understand that the greatest miracle was never that one powerful man bought a company before sunset. The real miracle was that he restored one mother's dignity, gave one little girl a future filled with certainty, and reminded all of us that the strongest hearts are not the ones that seek power. They're the ones that quietly choose kindness every single day.